You know, people always think being a chauffeur for a billionaire is glamorous. They picture the fancy cars, the nice suits, maybe a little bit of that high society shine rubbing off on you. Let me tell you, that's just a movie. In real life, it's mostly just sitting in traffic, waiting, and trying not to scratch a car that costs more than your entire neighborhood. My name is Leo, and for the last 18 months, I've been the personal driver for Sterling Vance. If you follow tech or finance, you know the name. Vance wasn't just rich. He was a kind of rich that changed city skylines just by signing a check. He was quiet, always working, always on the move. He owned a penthouse in Manhattan, a sprawling estate up in Connecticut, and a jet that looked like it belonged in a museum. And me? I drove the black, armored Cadillac Escalade that felt like a tank on wheels. I needed that job. Desperately. I'm talking about a need that digs into your guts and keeps you awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling. My wife, Maria, works 2 part-time jobs, but the cost of living in New York City? It's a monster. We had 3 kids, 3 hungry, growing, loud kids, and my oldest, Maya, she was facing college applications next year. I was trying to save for that, plus cover medical bills for my youngest, little Mikey, who needed constant physical therapy after a bad fall last winter. Every paycheck I got from Vance was already spoken for, usually 3 times over. Sterling Vance knew none of this, of course. He didn't ask about my life, and I certainly didn't offer. He was a good boss in that he paid well and on time, but he demanded absolute perfection. If the car wasn't exactly 68 degrees Fahrenheit, if the bottled water wasn't precisely Pellegrino, or if I was 30 seconds late picking him up from his morning run, he didn't yell. He didn't need to. He just gave you this look, a calm, level stare that told you he was already calculating how quickly he could replace you with someone better. He was testing me all the time, though he never said out loud. He'd leave a half-eaten granola bar wrapper on the seat, just to see if I'd notice, and dispose of it before he got back. He'd change the pickup time last minute, just to gauge my reaction time. Everything with Vance was a test of efficiency, preparedness, and loyalty. I had passed every test so far. I was the invisible man, the perfect shadow, and I needed to stay that way. Losing this job meant losing the apartment, and that meant losing everything. This particular Tuesday was brutal. It was late November. The air was sharp, and the traffic was a solid, miserable mess. We had spent the morning bouncing between meetings on Wall Street, and then Vance had demanded an unscheduled stop uptown at a private auction house. Something about a rare manuscript. "Wait here, Leo," he'd instructed, stepping out of the Escalade. He was wearing his standard charcoal suit, looked sharp enough to cut glass, and he barely glanced at me. 10 minutes, max. I have the flight to Chicago at 5. "Understood, Mr. Vance," I replied, moving quickly to open the heavy back door. He stepped out onto the curb, adjusted his cufflink, and then he did something incredibly unusual. Vance was a creature of habit. His phone was always in his left inner jacket pocket. His keys were in his right trouser pocket, and his wallet, a sleek, customized leather billfold, black as midnight, was always tucked neatly into the back pocket of his suit trousers. Always. He had a system, and he never deviated. But as he pulled his suit jacket tight against the cold, I saw his hand pause. Instead of tucking his wallet back, he slid it out. He looked at it for a second, almost thoughtfully, and then he placed it not carelessly but deliberately on the center console, right where the rear ventilation controls were. It was positioned perfectly, almost spotlighted by the weak afternoon sun filtering through the tinted window. He hesitated, just a moment, long enough for me to register the action. Then he closed the door with a soft thunk and walked briskly into the stone building. I watched him go, feeling a little knot tighten in my chest. Did he mean to do that? I sat there for maybe 60 seconds, my hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, still warm from the drive. My first instinct was to jump out, run into the auction house, and hand it to him. But Vance hated being interrupted, especially when he was dealing with business that involved millions. Interrupting him for something he obviously knew he was doing, because he looked at the wallet before setting it down, felt like a firing offense. Maybe he just needed the pockets free for maximum mobility. I tried to rationalize. That was stupid. He wasn't going to be running. The truth was I was tired. I was physically and mentally exhausted from 18 months of being perfectly vigilant. I decided to wait the 10 minutes. When he came back, I'd simply say, "Mr. Vance, you left this." Problem solved. I leaned back against the headrest, letting out a slow breath. The car was quiet. Too quiet. That wallet was sitting there, glowing like a tiny black beacon of temptation. I didn't mean to look at it closely, but my eyes kept drifting back. It wasn't just any wallet. It was alligator skin, customized, probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. It was thick, too. Vance didn't carry cash often, but when he did, it was usually large denomination for tips or quick purchases where credit cards were frowned upon. I started doing the math in my head, the insidious arithmetic of desperation. Rent was due Thursday. The landlord had been sending nasty texts. Mikey's physical therapist had called Maria that morning, demanding payment for the last 3 sessions. We were talking about maybe $4,000 just to stop the immediate bleeding. I shook my head slightly, trying to clear the thought. Asterisk no. Leo, stop it. Asterisk, I reached forward slowly, not to open it, but just to move it. I figured if I put it in the glove compartment, it would be safer, less conspicuous. My fingers brushed the cold, smooth leather, and then I felt the weight. It was substantial, more than just a few $100s. My internal clock ticked past 5 minutes. Vance was still inside. The cold was seeping into the car now that the engine was off. I pulled my hand back, gripping the wheel again. I started thinking about Maya. She wanted to apply to NYU. She was brilliant, straight A's, but tuition was astronomical. I had maybe $5,000 saved up, but that was supposed to be the emergency fund. If I tapped into that, we'd be completely exposed. Just look at what he carries. The dark whisper started. Asterisk just one. Peek. You need to know what you're guarding. Asterisk, it was the most pathetic excuse I'd ever heard, but it was enough to make me cave. I told myself it was for security. If I knew what was inside, I could better secure the vehicle. I took a deep, shaky breath and picked up the wallet. The leather was supple, expensive. I flipped it open, just enough to see the contents. It was packed. There was a stack of $100 bills, clipped neatly together. I didn't count them. I didn't need to, but the pile was thick. Maybe $10,000, maybe 15. The kind of money that I hadn't seen all together in one place since I got my first bank loan 15 years ago. Next to the cash were the cards, the black card, the platinum card, all the cards that signaled unlimited wealth. And finally, under a clear plastic sleeve, was his driver's license. Sterling Vance, 52, looking exactly like the man who had just walked into the auction house. But tucked under the license, almost hidden, was something else. A small piece of paper, folded twice. It looked like a personal note. I didn't touch it. I stared at the cash. My heart was pounding, thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. $15,000. Probably nothing to Vance. Less than a good bottle of wine. To me, it was salvation. It was rent, Mikey's therapy, and a small, hopeful down payment on Maya's future. I could take $5,000. No, maybe just $3,000. Vance would notice $3,000 missing from this stack. He was too busy dealing with mergers and acquisitions to count a stack of cash he probably considered loose change. He'd assume he spent it tipping someone or bought a trivial item. The temptation was a physical weight pressing down on my chest. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that one step forward solved all your immediate problems, but also ended your life as you knew it. Asterisk honesty, Leo. You're an honest man. Asterisk, that's what Maria always said. That's what I told my kids. But what was honesty worth if my son couldn't walk properly? What was integrity when my daughter's dream school was out of reach? This wasn't stealing from a poor man. This was taking water from an ocean. I closed the wallet quickly, the leather snapping shut with a crisp sound that echoed loudly in the quiet car. I put it back exactly where Vance had left it, on the center console. My hands were shaking. 10 minutes, max, he had said. I looked at my watch. 8 minutes had passed since he walked in. 2 minutes left. I tried to focus on the traffic, on anything but the black leather sitting inches away from my knee. I started humming a tune, trying to distract myself. Then the realization hit me, cold and sharp. Vance was a man who planned everything. He did not forget things. He did not make mistakes like this. He was hyper-aware of his possessions. He hadn't forgotten the wallet. He had left it, and he had left it right where I would be sure to see it. My blood ran cold. This wasn't an oversight. This was a test. The biggest one yet. He was testing my loyalty, yes, but more specifically, he was testing my financial integrity in the face of overwhelming need. He must have known, somehow, that I was struggling. Maybe he saw the old shoes I wore, or heard me take a discreet, worried call from the landlord. Maybe he just paid attention to everything. If I took the money, even a small amount, he would know. He would absolutely know. He probably had the cash numbered, or maybe he'd installed a tiny camera in the car. He was paranoid enough. If I failed this test, I wouldn't just be fired. The humiliation would be worse. He would expose me. I'd lose the job, the paycheck, and my reputation. I gripped the steering wheel, so hard my knuckles turned white. My whole body was tense, waiting. 1 minute left. I had to decide what to do with the wallet. Leaving it there felt passive, almost like hiding the evidence of temptation. Taking it and keeping it safe felt like the right move, the move of a loyal employee. I reached out and picked it up again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I slid it into the inner breast pocket of my suit jacket, right over my heart. I zipped up my jacket to secure it. If he asked, I would tell him I secured his property immediately for safety, knowing how valuable it was. That sounded professional. I looked up just as the heavy oak doors of the auction house swung open. Sterling Vance stepped out, pulling his jacket close again. He walked quickly toward the car, his eyes already on his phone. I jumped out, rushing to open the door, standing straight and tall. Everything satisfactory, Mr. Vance? I asked, keeping my voice level. He slid into the back seat without looking at me. Yes, Leo. Let's head to Teterboro. The jet is waiting. Right away, sir. I closed the door, walked around the front, and got back into the driver's seat. I started the engine, pulling smoothly away from the curb. We drove in silence for a few minutes, navigating the midtown gridlock. The wallet was heavy against my chest. I waited for him to check his pocket. I waited for him to notice the missing item. I waited for the question. Lil, he finally said, his voice calm, but sharp enough to cut through the city noise. Yes, Mr. Vance? Did you happen to notice anything unusual in the car after I exited the auction house? This was it, the moment of truth. My mouth felt dry. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, maintaining perfect professionalism. Yes, sir, I replied immediately. I noticed your wallet on the center console. Knowing your strict schedule and the value of your personal effects, I immediately secured it. placing it in my inner jacket pocket for safekeeping until your return. I reached up and patted the pocket, a gesture he could see clearly in the rear-view mirror. Vance was quiet for a long time. I could feel his eyes on me, assessing. It felt like hours, but it was probably only 30 seconds. "Good, Leo," he finally said, his voice completely flat. "Very good. Pass it back to me when we stop at the light ahead." When the light turned red, I pulled the wallet out slowly. I didn't look inside, didn't check the cash, just handed it back over the seat. Vance took it. He didn't thank me. He didn't even look at the wallet. He simply slid it back into his trouser pocket, the way he always did. We finished the drive to the airport in complete silence. He stepped out, and this time he was all business, completely ignoring me. "Wait for my call, Leo," he said, stepping onto the tarmac toward the Gulf Stream. "Will do, Mr. Vance. Have a safe flight." As the jet roared to life and taxied away, I drove the Escalade back to the parking garage in Queens. I felt drained physically and emotionally. I had passed the test, but the cost had been immense. The sheer force of what it took to ignore that mountain of cash. I parked the car, double-checking everything, just like always. I had barely sat down at my small, cluttered desk in the driver's lounge when my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Sterling Vance. Asterisk transfer complete. Check your bank account. Asterisk, that was all. No explanation, no thank you, just those 4 words. I frowned. Transfer? What transfer? Maybe a holiday bonus? It was early for that. I quickly logged into my bank app on my phone. My stomach flipped over when I saw the balance. There was a new deposit, a very large deposit. The amount wasn't a bonus. It was exactly the amount I needed to stabilize everything. Rent, Mikey's therapy, and a sizable chunk from Maya's tuition fund. It was significant. But scrolling down, I saw a second transaction. Another deposit, even larger than the first. This one was labeled simply, SV Investment. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering again, but this time not from fear, but from shock. The total amount was staggering. It wasn't just enough to cover my immediate needs. It was life-changing money. Enough money to pay off a mortgage, send Maya to any college she wanted, and take Maria off the payroll of her 2 miserable jobs. I sat there, frozen, staring at the numbers. This had to be a mistake. He couldn't have meant to send this much. I immediately called his personal assistant, a woman named Sharon, who was even more tightly wound than Vance himself. "Sharon, it's Leo," I whispered into the phone, stepping into the empty stairwell for privacy. "I just received a bank transfer from Mr. Vance. I think there's been an error, a very large error." Sharon's voice was crisp and professional. "Hold on, Leo. Let me check the memo." A moment of silence. "No, Leo, there is no error. Mr. Vance authorized 2 transfers. One is a disbursement to cover your immediate family needs, and the second is a substantial investment into your future." "But why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I just did my job." I returned his wallet. "Mr. Vance is aware of your circumstances, Leo," Sharon said, her voice softening just a fraction, a rare thing for her. "He also wanted me to relay a message, which he asked me to read verbatim." I held my breath, gripping the phone tightly. He said, "The wallet contained exactly $25,000 in cash, which I did not count before leaving it. The folded note under the license contained the instructions for the transfers. If the wallet had been returned with a single dollar missing, or if it had been opened and the note read prematurely, the transfers would have been canceled. Your honesty secured your future, Leo. You proved that integrity is not for sale." I leaned against the cold concrete wall of the stairwell, feeling dizzy. $25,000. I hadn't even been close in my estimation. And the note, The tiny folded piece of paper held the key to everything. He had tested not just my honesty, but my professional boundaries. I hadn't read the note. I hadn't even unfolded it. "And Leo," Sharon continued, "Mr. Vance also instructed me to inform you that you are no longer his driver, effective immediately." My heart sank again, despite the money. I had lost a job. I understand. I managed to stammer out. "But why, if I pass the test?" Sharon let out a small, almost undetectable sigh. "Because, Leo, Mr. Vance doesn't want a driver who is capable of becoming a millionaire. He needs a new challenge for you. He said you'll be receiving a new contract tomorrow. You've been promoted. You're now managing his fleet and all logistical operations for his private residences, effective Monday. He expects you to hire and train your replacement driver immediately. Congratulations, Leo." The phone clicked dead, leaving me standing there in the silent stairwell, the cold concrete suddenly feeling warm. I looked at the bank balance again. I wasn't just saved, I was set. All because I returned a wallet that was purposefully left behind. My choice had changed everything. I wasn't Leo, the struggling driver, anymore. I was Leo, the manager, and I knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. Vance hadn't just given me money. He had given me an opportunity one couldn't afford to waste. I had to prove that his investment in my integrity was the smartest business decision he had ever made. I stood there in that cold stairwell, staring at the numbers on my phone screen. My hand was shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. It wasn't just a big number. It was a number that erased years of worry, years of sleepless nights, years of pretending everything was fine when we were hanging on by a thread. I wasn't Leo, the struggling driver, anymore. I was Leo, the manager. And I was rich, not Vance rich, but free rich. I walked back into the driver's lounge, still in a daze. I packed my small desk, the one with a picture of Maria and the kids. I didn't need to be invisible anymore. The drive home was a blur. I kept pulling over, just to look at the bank balance again, making sure it wasn't a glitch, a cruel joke by some banking algorithm. Every time, the numbers were still there, solid and real. When I finally got to our apartment in Queens, the air was thick with the usual evening chaos. Maria was trying to help Maya with calculus homework, while simultaneously feeding Mikey a bowl of lukewarm mac and cheese. The TV was loud, and the smell of burnt toast. Someone was hungry, hung in the air. Maria looked up, wiping a smear of cheese from Mikey's face. She looked exhausted. "You're late, Leo. Everything okay? You look like you just ran a marathon." I sat down heavily on the couch. I couldn't just blurt it out. I needed a minute to collect myself. "We need to talk, Maria, but first get the kids settled. This is important." She frowned, seeing the intensity in my eyes. She knew my job was usually drama-free. If I was serious, it was serious. She quickly shooed the kids into their rooms, promising them 10 extra minutes of screen time if they stayed quiet. She sat next to me, her hand resting on my knee. "What is it? Did Vance fire you? Did you scratch the Escalade? Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." I took her hands in mine. They were rough from her 2 jobs, the catering gig and the bookstore clerk position. Those hands deserved better. "I was tested today, Maria." I started, my voice low and a little husky. I told her the whole story, every detail. The wallet, the deliberate placement, the cash, the temptation, the 5 minutes of pure moral warfare in the back of that car. I told her about putting the wallet in, my jacket, the silent drive to the airport, and the phone call from Sharon. When I got to the part about the bank transfer, she didn't believe me. "Leo, stop joking. What transfer?" I pulled up the app and handed her the phone. She looked at the screen. Her eyes widened. She scrolled down, then scrolled back up to the total. She read the transaction descriptions. A long, silent minute passed. Then another. She didn't scream. She didn't jump up and down. She just started to cry. Quietly, deeply. Tears streaming down her face and dripping onto the glass of my phone screen. "Is this real?" she whispered. Her voice choked. "Is Mikey going to be okay? Is Maya going to NYU?" I pulled her into a tight hug. "Yes, Maria. It's real. We're okay. We're more than okay." That night, we didn't sleep. We talked about plans. We paid off the landlord immediately. We called Mikey's therapist and scheduled all his future sessions, paid in full, up front. We looked at Maya's NYU application, not with fear, but with excitement. The first thing Maria did the next morning was quit the catering job. She kept the bookstore job, though. She loved books, and now she could work there just for fun, not out of necessity. It was the first time I had seen the genuine, stress-free smile I fell in love with 15 years ago. On Wednesday, the new contract arrived via private courier. Sterling Vance did nothing halfway. It wasn't just a manager title. It came with significant six-figure salary, stock options in one of the smaller holding companies, and a clear path for advancement. I was logistics and fleet manager for the Vance family office. My job was to manage the cars, the drivers, the properties, the security systems, everything that kept Vance's physical world operating smoothly. My first task was hiring my replacement. That was tough, not because of the skill set, but because I knew what that driver would be facing. I interviewed 5 guys, all excellent drivers, all polite, all sharp. But I was looking for something specific. I was looking for the invisible man who could handle the weight of the world on his shoulders while maintaining absolute integrity. I narrowed it down to a man named Carlos. Carlos was about my age, maybe early 40s, with a quiet intensity. He had been driving for an executive car service, working grueling hours. During the final interview, I did my own small, subtle test. I had Sharon leave a laptop bag, a nice, heavy one, clearly expensive, on the floor of the interview room, just slightly hidden under the table. When Carlos stood up to leave, he immediately noticed it. He didn't hesitate. He picked it up, turned to me, and said, "Sir, someone left this. Should I take it to the front desk?" It was small, nothing like Vance's high-stakes test, but it was enough. He didn't try to ignore it or look inside. He focused on securing the property. I hired Carlos on the spot. "Carlos," I said, shaking his hand, "this job pays well, but it demands absolute perfection, 24/7. You are the shadow. You see everything, but you say nothing, and you touch nothing that isn't yours. Understand?" He nodded firmly. "Understood, Mr. Leo. I appreciate the chance." I looked at him, remembering my own desperation. I knew he needed this job just as much as I had. "Good," I said. "Now let me show you the Escalade. And here's a piece of advice. Always check the center console before you clean the car. You never know what Mr. Vance might leave behind." I saw the flicker of curiosity in his eyes, but he just nodded again, professionally. I didn't tell him the full story, of course. That was my secret, the secret that bought my family's future. But I gave him the warning. I gave him a chance. The next few months were a whirlwind. I was working harder than ever, but the work was rewarding. I was building systems, hiring people, managing budgets. I realized Vance hadn't just promoted me. He had tapped into a skill set I didn't even know I had. Turns out, 18 months of hypervigilance, preparedness, and attention to detail prepares you perfectly for logistics management. I moved my office out of the driver's lounge and into a spacious, light-filled corner office in the Manhattan headquarters. I wore the same suits, but now they felt different. They felt like armor earned, not just borrowed for the role. 6 months after the test, Life was unrecognizable. We moved out of cramped Queens apartment and into a modest but beautiful house in a quiet suburb of New Jersey. Maria had started teaching art classes at the local community center, something she always dreamed of doing. Mikey, thanks to consistent, top-tier therapy, was walking and running almost perfectly. His smile was constant now. And Maya, she was accepted early admission to NYU. She was ecstatic. We walked the campus together that spring, and I didn't feel the crushing weight of tuition staring me down. I felt pride. I still saw Sterling Vance frequently, but our interactions were different. I was no longer waiting for him in the car. I was briefing him in conference rooms, presenting him with efficiency reports, and advising him on security upgrades for his Connecticut estate. One afternoon, I was in his Manhattan penthouse going over the annual fleet maintenance budget. He was standing by the massive window, looking out over Central Park, a tiny figurine against the massive skyline he helped create. He turned to me, holding a cup of coffee. He rarely offered praise, so when he did, it felt like winning an Olympic medal. The new security protocols you implemented in Connecticut saved us $40,000 this quarter, Leo. Efficient work. Thank you, Mr. Vance, I replied, keeping my composure. He set his coffee down and looked directly at me, a rare, extended look that still held that intense, calculating intelligence. You know, Leo, he said, his voice thoughtful. People often ask me what the most valuable asset in my portfolio is. They expect me to say a tech patent or maybe a piece of real estate. I waited, knowing this was leading somewhere important. But the truth, he continued, is that the most valuable thing any person or company can possess is integrity. It's the only thing you can't buy, and it's the only thing that guarantees performance when no one is watching. He paused, a slight, almost imperceptible smile touching the corner of his mouth. That day, when you returned the wallet, you didn't just return $25,000 in cash. You returned a complete, proven package of character. That kind of certainty, Leo, is worth far more than any dollar amount I transferred to you. I understand, sir, I said honestly. You didn't just invest in my family, you invested in certainty. Exactly, he affirmed. And I don't make bad investments. He didn't bring up the wallet again, and neither did I. It didn't need discussing. The results spoke for themselves. I realized then that Vance wasn't just testing me to keep me honest. He was testing me because he knew that a man desperate for money, but who refuses to compromise his values even when faced with absolute temptation, is a man who can be trusted with everything. He was looking for the rare kind of person whose moral compass doesn't swing, no matter the storm. I finished the budget review, shook his hand, and walked out of the penthouse, heading back to my office. I was no longer driving the armored Escalade. I had my own company car, a nice sedan, practical and understated. As I drove across town, navigating the familiar gridlock, I thought back to that Tuesday afternoon, sitting in the car, watching the sun catch the black alligator skin of that wallet. I remember the cold sweat, the pounding heart, and the sheer weight of temptation. It's funny how life works. For 18 months, I had been trying to save my family, scraping and worrying, inching forward. But it wasn't the hard work that saved us. It was a simple, painful, difficult choice to do the right thing when the wrong thing was laid out like a feast before me. Integrity isn't just about avoiding bad things. It's about opening the door to good things you never thought possible. I pulled up to the office garage, parked my car, and walked toward the elevator. I had a lot of work to do, a whole fleet to manage, and a whole future to build. And I knew with absolute certainty that no matter how high I climbed, I would never forget the lesson learned in the back of that Cadillac. The real value of man is not what he earns, but what he refuses to take. That choice, that single moment of moral clarity, truly changed everything. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the truth of how a simple wallet turned a desperate driver into a millionaire's trusted partner. Thank you for listening.